Expert insight, clear analysis, strategy in action. Welcome to the CEO to CEO podcast, featuring the world's top CEOs. The podcast will welcome honest conversations meant to challenge traditional ways of thinking from fellow global industry leaders. This podcast will also explore the intricate world of M&A from an insider's perspective. M&A is a big deal, one in which you can drive the future of your business, your industry, and even the trajectory of the marketplace. This podcast is hosted by Kevin Campbell, CEO of Synity. Synity is a global enterprise data solution provider specializing in data operations and data transformation. Kevin is a global champion in data and has served as the former Group Chief Executive Officer at Accenture and COO of Oscar Insurance Corporation. This week, Kevin sits down with Adam Boitnott, CEO of Hylaine, a software consulting firm built on trust and transparency. Hylaine's unique project-based technology solutions help the clients they serve embrace digital transformation while maximizing their return on investment. Before starting Hylaine, Adam found success at Accenture and Avanade, and later held leadership roles at Shenandoah Life Insurance, NetVentures, and CTS. With over 20 years of technological-driven experience under his belt, Adam founded Hylaine. It's a company that combines all of Adam's success in the technology world with his unique perspective of the client's world.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's CEO to CEO podcast. Our guest today is Adam Boitnott, and Adam is the founder and CEO of Hylaine, a IT services company. So, Adam, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you start giving us a little, with a quick overview of your career? Because everybody's always interested in hearing about how everybody else got to where they got to.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I studied finance at Virginia Tech, and I assumed I would be a financial advisor coming out of school. But I was fortunate to come out in 1998 with a great job market, and I had 6 or 7 job offers, and the one that paid the most was with Andersen Consulting and IT. And I was broke, so that's how I made my decision. So Andersen, of course, ships you off, teaches you everything you need to know about IT, and then bills you out 3 weeks later, and you're an IT professional. So very fortunate that my career got into that track. It has been rewarding and opened up a lot of doors to have that background and have a finance degree as well. So started off in consulting. Andersen and Microsoft formed Avanade. I was one of the guys that went over to Avanade to get that running. And after that, I went into industry for 8 years at a insurance carrier. I ran operations and technology. And then I was a CIO of a software as a services firm who focused on operations software for YMCAs and Jewish community centers across the country. Then got back into consulting here in Charlotte, moved to Charlotte 5.5 years ago. Got back into consulting when we first came here. And then 3.5 years ago started Hylaine. So that's the 2-minute version of the career.
Great. And then what made you decide to found Highline?
So for us, we saw an opportunity in the market because the firm I was running in Charlotte, so it was a Birmingham-based firm, and I was running the Charlotte office. And it got acquired by a large consulting firm headquartered in Canada. And for me, it was just an opportunity at that time to say, hey, you know what, I've got some nuances that I think matter in the market and can be appealing to folks. So I wanted to go try my hand at that. The software as a services firm that I ran when I was a CIO, that kind of gave me the bug for, can you do your own thing? Should you do your own thing? And then consulting to me is obviously something I started in my career with, and something I knew we were pretty good at is delivering projects and getting things done the right way. So it was the right time in our family's life cycle, and also the right time in my professional life cycle.
And how did you come up with the name?
So the name is a combination of my daughter's names, Hilton and McLean. So we spell Hilton with a Y. So the HYL and the LAINE both come from, LAINE from McLean, and Hilton's got the HYL. So for me, it was, we knew we were going to start a company. I took a walk one day and I said, hey, I'm going to figure out the name of the company on this walk. Came back a couple hours later and said, I think I figured it out, because not only does it blend the girls' names together, which is important to remind us that we are a family and we should do the right things all the time, but it starts to invoke that imagery of high lane or high road and doing the right thing, executing at the right level when things get difficult, as they do in the technology industry. Who's going to do the right thing? And that's I really like it from that perspective.
And when you decided to found the company, how did you weigh risks and opportunities? Right, because I'm sure it's always easy to say, "Oh, the opportunities, we could do all these things," but I'm sure there's been many a sleepless night too.
Yeah, there were. And it's funny, my wife has a picture of me. It's about the moment where we officially decided, okay, we're going forward. And we have an island in our kitchen. And I just kind of laid on the island and was like, oh boy, here we go. And she took a picture of it. And in her head, I think that's her vision of day one. But, the biggest risk, and I tell this story a lot when people ask it or we have an event. When we decided to start it, I asked my wife Dawn. I said, "Hey, if I take all this money that we have and I put into this and I blow it, are you going to divorce me?" And she said, "No, we're in this together. We'll figure it out." And I said, "Okay, well, if that's the worst thing that can happen, then and that's not going to happen, then I'm good moving forward." So that's how it happened.
And today there's quite a few IT service providers of all size and depth and specialty. How did you basically decide what your differentiation was going to be?
Yeah, so we decided that we wanted to create a place that attracted and retained the best talent. So we hire that mid to senior level IT consultant. And we think that bringing in talent, keeping talent, making culture a focal point for what we do matters, right? So we see a lot of times, and for those of us who've been in the big firms, in your first couple of years, I mean, they're going to push you hard, and 2-3 years, you're gonna bolt out of that, and that's not the model that we want. We're trying to build a firm that in our local markets, Charlotte, Raleigh, and Atlanta, today, we're wrapping our culture around these folks. We're keeping them in the company. We're providing not only great people to our clients, but great jobs for our consultants. It's one of the things that we want to look back at the end of all this and say we did is created a place where work didn't have to suck every day. And they come in, they enjoy it, they support each other, and they were proud to be a part of it.
So it's you and your ideas. How'd you go get your first client?
So I had left a consulting firm to start this, so there was a non-compete in place. So my very first client called me at noon on the first day I was open and said, "Hey, we'd love to take this money and spend it with you." And I said, "Look, we got to pump the brakes for a year on that one." We had, you know, been involved in the area and a lot of networking organizations. So we had a good network of folks to reach out to. So we started in September and we used those first couple months as our ramp up period of time. But we had some great conversations through those networking organizations, Aparo being one of them. And Aparo is a nonprofit here in Charlotte, which does some great things and brings IT professionals together as well. And through those conversations, we landed our first enterprise client. Our first real client that paid us money was a guy that came up to me on the basketball court that said, "Hey, I saw what you're doing, and I've got this idea for an app. Will you build it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I can do that. I've got nothing else going on." So first guy we actually did sign at my kitchen table. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's great, and I'm sure there's been many more since then. How long have you been in business now?
So a little over 3.5 years.
Okay. So yeah, so you've gotten to the past the initial milestones, and now are in the scaling phase, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's been one of the things I've been highly aware of. Somebody gave me advice, actually, TJ Eberly, who's one of our investors, that most companies don't fail at startup, they fail in high growth. So it's something for me that I've always kept at the forefront of my mind is, remembering high growth and how are we thinking 6 months, 12 months down the road to ensure that we're set up for that.
Actually, I hadn't heard that before, the high growth piece. I know it's true in the scaling, but I think that's a really good piece of advice there, to think about that growth phase and can you make it to that next, where you matter, right?
Right.
And where you're delivering projects at scale. Who does? So my guess is TJ is one of the people you look to for advice. Who else and how did you build your network of people to count on to be the CEO. As I remind people all the time, and you and I talked about before, CEO is a lonely job, right?
It is. Yeah. So, TJ actually had done something very similar years ago here in Charlotte. He built a consulting firm and he had success and was able to exit that. And now he's an investor. And he gave me lots of great advice as I started this company. And of course, he and I have dialogue weekly today about what we're doing and how it's going and what to think about. Some others are more observational mentors, and that so we got it when I was running the software as a services firm. We got acquired by our largest competitor, Daxco, and it was run by a guy at the time, David Gray, and he was a big culture guy. So when he acquired us, I had a 6-month transition period to really be around him and get to know him and see what he did. And he impacted me a lot in that culture piece of it, right? And how he invested in his people, some of the things that he did day in and day out, and why it mattered. So David, for me, has been somebody who I've sought to emulate from a culture perspective as well.
When you talk about building culture, what are the things at Hylaine today that are kind of important? You talked about family feeling and stuff, but tell me a little bit more about your culture.
Yeah, so we have an acronym called TRUST, and transparent, results focused, upbeat, soliciting feedback, and being thankful. Each of those things, it's not just something on the wall, right? It's something that we test ourselves against all the time. The pandemic brought us some unique challenges, right? There was a period of a month where it was, a lot of our clients called us and said, we have to stop all of our projects. We have no idea what's ahead of us. So, but through that, we don't seek to just be a cheerleader in the good times. We are very transparent with the team. We built that culture a lot through that, not only the good times, but some of the more challenging. And one of the other ones that we really focus on a lot is being results focused, right? So whether that's a policy we're seeking to put in place here in Highline, or just kind of how we interact with our team, are we doing something that's getting results? Or are we just checking a box, right? So one of the reasons I started this is I thought there was an opportunity to create a firm where you did more than just check some of those boxes, right? You were focused on results and you did things related to that. So we've all filled out kind of reports that we think are silly in some other size firms, and so it's things like that we may do. We will always question it, and we build that up through that. And then the other piece that I try to do internally and externally a lot of is really being thankful. These folks sitting outside my office don't have to work here, and our clients don't have to work with us. To your point, there's a lot of options, and luckily we've picked an industry where demand outpaces supply. So we don't get too hyper about all the other providers out there, but there are certainly options.
So you talked about COVID. How has COVID changed your business?
So being a relationship-based business, externally and internally, not being able to be with people presented a lot of challenges, right? We had to adapt, and internally we had to adapt with our culture, and our employee engagement team had to, we used to put events on, and we would go to events together and we'd be with each other. And now they were having to adapt to this world where checking in on people remotely was, part of it, which can seem a little more stiff and formal than some of the informal ways. But we do a Friday morning meeting where I update the team. We talk about some other things. And at the end, we do what's called shout outs. And our team will shout each other out for stuff that they've done during the week. And part of COVID that was interesting for me is I would have people in those shout out sessions say, hey, I want to thank Chrissy or Stephanie or Sierra on our employee engagement team, because they called me and just talked to me about personal stuff, and I needed it that day. I was really struggling. I was lonely. And that when you're the CEO and you hear that, your culture is being, pervasive throughout the organization, because people are taking care of each other, right? They're not waiting on you to do it.
Yeah, so important, especially in this time where we're by and large missing the human connection, right? So it was terrific. So you started in Charlotte, and then you went to Raleigh. That's just like a long drive from there. But now you've taken the big jump, so you either got to have a really long drive or a quick flight for Atlanta. So what was behind that decision to expand in Atlanta?
Yeah, so we actually hadn't set out to open up Atlanta, but we got a phone call from someone in Atlanta who said, "Hey, I heard what you're doing in Charlotte and Raleigh, and I think Atlanta would benefit from this." And we said, "Well, let's take a look at the market, at Tamara, who was running that for us now, who we were talking with, and you know, we like Atlanta. There's a lot of opportunity, but Tamara was the absolute right person, and we're entrepreneurial enough to say, you know what, this is the right person. And during COVID, we did a lot of things to build up our ability to scale. Thinking about high growth, right? So we were able to say yes to the right person, and every time I go down to Atlanta, I was just there, and we actually got to go to my first networking event in over a year in Atlanta, which was great. They had 117 people on a rooftop. ATP did, and that was a lot of fun. But everyone there telling me how much they thought of Tamara, how well connected she is, how she seeks to do the right thing, and I'm glad we were able to make that decision.
Yeah, one of the things that Ray Dalio, the legendary investor that I worked for him,
Mm-hmm.
his favorite question is always, "Who's the who?" So you can be asking at any presentation, any strategy, anything else, but he said the who makes a big difference. And being a Process Six Sigma guy, I focused on that for a little, but as the longer I'm around, I realize, and it sounds like that's what you found, the right who. And when you've got that right person there, it makes a huge difference.
It does, and that she aligns with our culture. She's you know built that same brand and culture for herself that we would have wanted to. So when you find that, it goes back to that adage, and TJ will say this a lot, right? Is find the right person, we'll find the seat on the bus.
Right.
We were lucky to get her.
Growth. And how do you think about, as you sit in your seat, the difference between organic growth or finding the right person and growing, and then maybe some M&A in your future?
Yeah, so as you're aware, M&A in the services space can be difficult, and I've been through it, and I've seen the goods and the bad of it. Because you're changing culture. People, it's an opportunity for people just to leave, and in our business, right, people are not only team members for us, but they're the product at the end of the day. So we do have a vision for acquiring other firms in the future. Today it's been all organic. But our one of our big tests is going to be culture, because if we go and try to put our culture into a place that's dramatically different than who we are today, I think we run a high risk for people having attrition, right? You might keep the clients for a little bit, but you're going to lose the people, and you're going to get in this high recruiting cycle. So being a firm that's focused on culture, I think that will drive us in our decisions to who to bring into the family later. We do, we know it's a challenge. We've started to think about that playbook and what that's going to look like to be able to do that, and what's important. We've built some additional tools in the organization to help us with that. Again, during COVID, we had some extra capacity with some really great consultants, so we built some tools that help with that as well. So I would say we'll probably be in the market for that in 2022, 2023.
The first podcast that I did was with Joe Tucci, who's head of EMC, Wang before that, then EMC. And at EMC, he did 20 odd deals, right? And so I'm asking Joe, right? I said, what do you look for? And I thought that, we'd look at the combination of EBITDA and strategic value. And he said, Kevin, the thing I've learned the hard way is find people that see the world the way he phrased it was, see the world the way you do. Right. He said, because if you don't see the world and the future the same way, you're going to end up at conflicts, and everything else is going to be. So he said, that's why it's so important in the beginning to see the world the same way. And I thought that was, great advice.
That is, I'm going to tuck that one away. That's a great way to say it.
Yeah. Two questions I like to ask all of our guests as we wrap up, which is, who have been your mentors, and how did you seek out those mentors and develop those relationships?
Mm-hmm. Some have been, so I'm a big, if I see you having success, you will be someone I'm interested in gaining knowledge from, right? So as I've seen some mentors in my life, whether it's been TJ or David Gray that I mentioned before, or watching the success of another guy, Jonathan Hagmeyer, who was a middle school principal. He started Interactive Achievement, which is an education software company. They got acquired by Power School, and that firm has just flourished. All of his people kind of stayed in that Power School environment. Watching people like that, those are the ones that from time to time I ping, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this, or have you dealt with that, or give me an opinion on this. And so for me, it's people who I've personally seen have a level of success, and I know they went through tough times, right? They didn't just step into a big job and keep executing that big job, right? They had to do something from nothing.
Yeah. Who do you reach to when you really, things look dim for you, right? Maybe the beginning of COVID or some other external advice.
So for me, it's at the end of the day, it comes down to TJ Eberly, who I mentioned to you, and then in those situations, my wife, who is the chief underwriting officer for Legal & General, she has a lot of experience, and she knows me the best. I mean, she knows what's real and where my stress comes from, and those type of things. So that's at the end of the day, when those things happen, those are the two I reach out to.
So that's that's an asset there to have your wife understand risk, right? And how do you look at risk, and how do you mitigate risk?
Yeah, very much so. But as you can imagine, a underwriter has a different view on risk than an entrepreneur.
Yes,
So.
probably polar opposites, right?
That's right. That's right.
How you're looking at it. What's the best career advice you've ever gotten along the way?
So it's something that I read early on. It was my senior year of college, and it was a quote by Hugh McCall, who was at Nations Bank at the time, ended up Bank of America. And
Legendary.
he said the thing he lived off of the motto was, take any job given, do it better than anybody else, and ask for more. And I think I've tried to really model that throughout my career, and it's something I remember all the time. And you'll have somebody come up to you and say, I'm just slammed. I can't get to X, Y, and Z. And right or wrong, probably wrong. I don't think I've ever said that. Right? There's never been a moment where I said, I can't do that. Well, I'll figure it out. Let's figure out how to grind away and get that done.
That's what makes you an entrepreneur, right? We'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Well, Adam, thanks for being on today. Really appreciated it. And so a lot of good tidbits in there for people to learn and listen to. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I enjoy doing these.
And everybody, thanks for joining us today. And tune in again in a couple of weeks when we have another CEO to CEO podcast with another one of the industry leaders. Take care.
Thank you for joining the CEO to CEO podcast. Join us next time as we uncover data strategies to support mergers, acquisitions, divestitures with the world's top CEOs.